Welcome to the Wife Stories YouTube channel. New video every day, and don't forget to subscribe. Here we go.
Hey man, you there? Hello. His voice crackled through the speaker before I realized I'd pressed the phone too tightly to my ear. I could almost feel his breath across the line. I said nothing. I just listened, counting the beats of my own heart. My knuckles were already throbbing from slamming into the living room wall a moment ago. A fine spider web of cracks spread outward where my fist had landed, drywall dust drifting to the carpet. The pain in my hand felt distant, replaced by a dull ache behind my eyes. I stayed silent. He repeated, "Hello," but I didn't speak. Couldn't. The phone screen displayed an unknown number, but I recognized his tone, even if I had never heard it before. Not like this. It was the voice of a man who thought he was safe. I forced myself to breathe quietly, measured. He exhaled. "I guess you're not around. Maybe your wife left her phone somewhere." My wife. My wife's phone. I pressed end, but didn't set the device down right away. I just stood there, staring at my reflection in the dark screen. Then I noticed the hairline fractures near the base of my thumb. My fist was bleeding. The stinging made everything real again. I wish I could say that was the first sign, the first flicker of suspicion that something in our marriage was rotten. But it wasn't. I'd seen the cracks for months, heard them in her voice when she'd hum a certain tune, felt them in her touch that grew colder in bed. Not that I was perfect. I'd thrown myself into my work, ignoring how she drifted. We had a life, a child, responsibilities. I guess I thought it was enough that we survived day to day. But now there was a man calling her phone, speaking to me, accidentally, presumably, like I didn't exist, like I was just static on the line, and I realized I'd known the truth all along. I wiped my hand against my jeans, leaving a smear of blood on the fabric, and moved to the kitchen. Every step hammered into my chest, a drumbeat of anger that was slowly building. I set the phone on the counter, next to the coffee machine. Ironic. That coffee machine was the stage of so many memories. Mornings she would sing softly while measuring out the grounds, swaying her hips in that casual way I used to love. Our son chattering at the table, cereal in front of him, laughter in the air. It was so vivid in my mind that I could almost see her there now, except the kitchen was empty, and the overhead light flickered. Dead quiet. I replayed that voice in my head. A man. Confident, but with a slight hesitation when he realized who might be listening. My eyes drifted to the phone again, waiting for it to ring, daring me to pick it up. Instead I turned, walked over to the hallway mirror, and looked at myself. My hair in disarray, my jaw clenched so tight it hurt. I'm not a violent guy, but at that moment, I hated my own reflection for looking so powerless. For letting this happen under my nose. I didn't confront her about it right away. I like to think I'm methodical, a man who collects evidence. I write investigative articles for a living, after all, exposing corporate fraud, political corruption, shady deals. People trust me to find the truth. I had no illusions that the truth, in this case, would be pleasant. But I needed it, because the alternative was to keep living a lie. The next day, she hummed that same old tune, one that used to be special to me, while preparing breakfast. My left hand was taped up, but she hardly asked about it. "What did you do?" She'd said, half laughing, as though I were just clumsy. "Punch a wall." I said nothing. My eyes flickered over her shoulder, watching the back of her neck. She had no idea how close to the mark her joke was. Maybe she did, but she didn't want to connect the dots. The air between us felt strangely thick, like we both knew there was a conversation we weren't having. But she just turned back to the pan, stirring eggs, singing under her breath. That humming. Months ago, it had been my anchor on long days. She used to sing for me in the dark hours of the morning, leaning into my side, lips close to my ear. Now that same melody felt like a blade. I reached for my coat and said, "I'm going to the bus stop with our son." She barely looked up from the stove. "Sure," she said. He's dressed and ready. I stepped into my son's room. He was tugging on his backpack, red-nosed from a cold he couldn't seem to shake. He gave me a small smile, the kind that always managed to crack something inside me. "Dad, can we get hot cocoa after school?" I forced a smile back. "Of course. Let's go." We walked out into the crisp morning. A biting wind cut across our cheeks, but I was grateful for the cold. It gave me something else to focus on besides the burning behind my eyes. My son coughed a little. I draped an arm around his shoulder as we made our way to the curb where the yellow school bus always stopped. She came out behind us eventually, still in her bathrobe, arms wrapped around herself. She took a few steps forward, then paused at the gate. The bus rumbled up, and the door yawned open. I caught a glimpse of the driver's face, a man in his late 40s, with a bored expression, as if he'd been driving these same streets for decades. And then, there it was. That detail I tried so desperately to ignore or rationalize. She started humming again, more distinctly this time. The same quiet intake of breath she used whenever she got to the chorus of that song. It was no big production, just a snippet of melody as my son climbed the steps. But she let the driver hear it. She smiled at him, slow, a bit too warm, as though the two shared a private moment. I stood there, fists in my coat pockets, feeling my chest tighten. That song had once been mine alone. She would whisper it in my ear. She said it was our thing. And now she was sharing it with a stranger. Not quite an intimate secret, not yet. But it drove a spike into me anyway. I wanted to lash out, to say, "Don't you dare do that in front of me." But I swallowed it. The last couple of weeks had taught me a bitter lesson. Each time she performed that quiet performance, it wasn't truly for me anymore. She had her own reasons, hidden in the little smirks she thought I wouldn't notice. The bus rolled away, carrying my son to school. She turned to me, arms still folded. "You okay?" she asked. "I'm fine," I said, stepping back inside. She didn't follow right away. I felt her eyes on my back, but I didn't look over my shoulder. I knew I'd see an expression I might mistake for concern or pity, and that might have broken the last piece of my composure. Asterisk, 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 I started paying closer attention. The missed phone calls. The texts that arrived late at night with no name, only short phrases. She'd dart into the bathroom, phone in hand, close the door behind her. Her excuses were so flimsy, but I'd spent so long ignoring them. Then came the day our child fell ill. A nasty fever that wouldn't break. We ended up in the local clinic for tests. I remember how small he looked in that waiting room. Trying to be brave while the nurse poked his arm for blood samples, I pressed my palm against his forehead, feeling the heat. My wife was beside me, face ashen, biting her bottom lip like she used to in college whenever she got nervous. His fever was high enough that the doctor insisted on more thorough checks. The next day, they called us back in, asked for a more comprehensive test. DNA, something about potential markers for a genetic predisposition. They wanted both parents' samples. I'd done DNA pieces in my investigative reporting, stories about paternal rights, complicated custody cases. I knew the moment the words DNA test left the doctor's mouth what was coming. Not that I wanted to see it, not that I was prepared, but a small voice inside me whispered, "This is it. This is the moment that changes everything." The test results took a few days. My wife looked even paler than before, pacing the hallways, jumping at every phone call. I remember how she wouldn't meet my eyes when I asked if everything was okay. Meanwhile, our son's fever subsided, leaving him tired but stable. We brought him home, tucked him into bed, read him stories. I tried to pretend that maybe there was no reason to worry, that the DNA test was purely medical. But each time I held my wife's gaze, I saw fear. The results arrived in a sealed envelope. The doc tried to be gentle. "Everything else is fine," he said, "but I have to inform you." And that was that. My DNA did not match my son's. He was not biologically mine. I don't remember the next few minutes clearly, just the sense of everything shutting down inside me. The doctor kept talking about how it didn't change anything about how we should proceed with my son's care. He had a mild infection, nothing worse. But it changed everything else. Absolutely everything else. She whispered something about how it wasn't what it looked like, how it was a mistake, as though you could accidentally scramble paternal data. I recall the color draining from her face when I simply stood up and walked out. I didn't storm out with curses or dramatic gestures. I just left, because I couldn't breathe in that office anymore. I drove home in a haze, parked in the driveway, turned off the engine, and sat there, waiting for the rage or heartbreak, or something else to swallow me whole. But I felt only emptiness. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. She came home later, alone. Our son was with her parents, who had arrived to help. She didn't speak immediately. I was in the living room, staring at the TV. It was turned off, a dark reflection of the two of us. I had the same dryness in my mouth that I got after too much coffee. She stepped in front of me. "John, we need to talk." The corners of my vision went white. I let out a breath. "Talk," I said. My voice had a hollow ring. She tried to explain. She said it happened once, years ago, before we were married. She was lonely. She was scared of something or other. She didn't think it would matter. She said it was complicated. She said a lot of things. I mostly just heard the sound of her voice, not the words. They blurred together, like water swirling down a drain. When she finally paused, I stared at her. I could almost see my reflection in her pupils, red-rimmed eyes, jaw clenched. I said, "That was the father on the phone, wasn't it?" She looked away. She swallowed hard. He didn't want to cause trouble, but I can't stop him from calling. Every muscle in my body twitched. I thought of the phone calls, the hush in her voice, the texts. And I wondered if they were more than phone calls, if maybe she kept a piece of him close all these years. But I didn't raise my voice, didn't strike her or do anything dramatic. I just got up, walked to the kitchen, pulled open a drawer, and withdrew a small digital recorder. I set it on the counter. "Press record." I said, "if you feel like telling me the rest." Then I went to the bedroom, locked the door, and stared at the single sheet of paper in my hand. The DNA result. The black text repeated in my head like a funeral toll. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. A few nights later, I was in the hallway outside our bedroom, and I heard it again. That gentle, quiet singing. But it wasn't for me. She was alone, presumably thinking I'd gone for a drive. I had a small voice recorder in my pocket, a habit from my journalist days. I pressed the record button, not to blackmail or threaten her, more so to capture that intangible crack in my reality. Her footsteps in the hall, the floor creaking, her voice. Each note seemed to mock me now. The hush on the final breath of the chorus. She was repeating the habit, the same way she did when we were younger. Only now every part of that melody felt stolen. I can't say why I did it. Some men might have confronted her right there. Some might have broken down. I just recorded the sound of her footsteps. The way they echoed in that quiet corridor felt more truthful than anything else in that moment. Because footsteps can't lie. They have a distinct, unchangeable rhythm. If I replayed it, I could measure exactly how many steps it took for her to pass from the bedroom to the kitchen. Maybe that single bit of data gave me something to hold on to. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. We had no more illusions, no more pretense of normalcy. Our son still needed care, of course, but her parents were around, so we moved like ghosts in our own home, avoiding each other. By then, my fury was simmering. I'd spent years thinking our marriage was anchored in honesty. Now I wondered what else was a lie. Then I saw that wretched book of poems. She'd always bragged about it, her collected letters of love, as she called them. She told everyone they were her own compositions, all original. She'd insisted they were personal, the fruit of her heart. The day she first showed me the early drafts, I'd had a strange sense of déjà vu, Like some lines were too familiar. But I was proud of her, wanted to support her creativity. So I never questioned it. Until I recognized entire lines, word for word, from an old friend's blog. Then from my own scribblings I'd once shared with her in our college days. She had stolen them from me, from mentors, from people around her. She'd stitched them together and called it her own. When I confronted her with the evidence, dates, matched lines, the exact sources, she froze. "It's not what you think," she said, voice trembling. I was inspired. They're paraphrased. Paraphrased. I nearly laughed, the sound bitter. "You took entire stanzas." Her lips parted, but no sound came out. A few seconds passed. Finally, she whispered, "I'm sorry." I went into the living room. I grabbed the published copy of her so-called Letters of Love. It smelled faintly of fresh paper and ink, like all new books. She tried to stop me, but I pulled away. My hand was steady. I set the book in our fireplace, flicked a lighter, and watched the edges curl, blacken. In a matter of minutes, the pages had turned to ash. She stood there in shock, tears brimming. But I felt nothing except a cold satisfaction that at least one lie in this house was now reduced to dust. I left her sobbing in the living room and climbed into bed. I expected to be sleepless, but exhaustion slammed into me, and I dropped into a dreamless black. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. For the next few days, we coexisted in a strange limbo. My anger had transmuted into a chilling numbness. She tried to speak to me, tried to explain more, but I gave her one-word answers when absolutely necessary. Otherwise, I was silent. Because I realized that no matter what she said, it wouldn't fix the betrayal. My entire identity as a husband had been overshadowed by the knowledge that my fatherhood was a facade. And yet, strangely, I couldn't hate my son. Nothing about him was at fault. He was the only innocent soul in this entire mess. That morning he crawled onto my lap, sniffing from the remnants of his fever, and asked if I still loved him. It nearly shattered me. I hugged him tight. "You're my boy. Always." And I meant it. Biology be damned. He was mine. And for him, I would survive anything. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. I found a letter in the mail a week later, her lover's handwriting, though he didn't sign it with his name. Just an initial. He was trying to reach her, or us, or maybe just her parents' house. My guess is he'd gotten wind that the truth was out. I left the envelope unopened on her desk. Another time, I might have torn it to pieces, but now I felt done. I still had responsibilities, articles to write, interviews to conduct. My editor was breathing down my neck about a big corruption piece, but I couldn't focus. I'd sit in front of my laptop, stare at the screen, reread the same sentences. Then I'd close my eyes and remember that voice on the phone. At night, she no longer sang. She hardly spoke either. The house was so quiet that even the light bulb's hum in the hallway was noticeable. The difference was, I didn't mind the silence. There was a strange solace in it. A part of me relished how each day began in near silence, ended in near silence. Words had been so twisted in our life together that they'd lost meaning. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Then came the day of my son's big school project. He had a presentation, something about sea life. He'd been rehearsing for weeks, excited despite his recent illness. She said she'd drive him, but he specifically asked if I could take him, and I agreed. It felt like a small father-son moment, one I wasn't sure I'd get many of in the future, not if everything was about to unravel. We got to the school early. He went inside with his trifold poster. I lingered by the main entrance, leaning against the wall, letting the sun warm my face. That's when I saw him. The man from the phone. I recognized him instantly. Maybe it was a sixth sense, or the way he looked around like he belonged yet didn't. He had that aura of someone searching for someone. He didn't see me, so I stayed back, letting the flow of parents and children pass between us. Finally, he turned down an empty hallway. I followed. My heart thundered. For a second, I pictured all the savage things I wanted to do. Slam him against the lockers, yell in his face. But when I got close enough to see the lines around his eyes, the uncertainty in his stance, I froze. He noticed me. His eyes flicked from my face to the band of tension across my shoulders. "Are you?" he began. I cut him off. "I'm her husband." He swallowed. Then he looked away. "I'm sorry," he murmured. His voice was so soft, not at all triumphant, not the confident tone I expected. My nails bit into my palm. Part of me wanted him to be a monster, to make my anger righteous and clean. But life is rarely so convenient. "Why are you here?" I demanded. He let out a ragged breath. "I wanted to see her." "See her," I repeated, like the words themselves were poison. He nodded. "I haven't wanted to cause a scene." Then he looked up, and for a moment I glimpsed a flicker of guilt in his eyes. I didn't plan for any of this to happen. A surge of violence shot through me, but I swallowed it. "You never do you?" I said, my voice quaking. "Did you plan for a child, though? Did you plan that I'd raise him, believing he was mine?" He stared at me, lips parted. "I didn't know for sure. Not until recently. She never told me." My pulse hammered in my ears. "You found out and decided to jump in now." He shook his head, eyes dropping to the floor. "I wanted to help, or to be involved, at least. He trailed off. "She said you two were drifting." That cut. I pictured all the times we had a stupid argument or an awkward silence. The gap she claimed had grown between us. Did that justify any of this? Of course not. But it explained how easily she might have confided in him. "You got your wish," I said, forcing the words through clenched teeth. "Everything's ruined. You happy?" He shook his head again. "I'm not happy. This isn't what I wanted." I barked a hollow laugh. That's the problem with lying. No one thinks ahead. He looked like he wanted to say something else, but I turned on my heel, back rigid, and walked off. I heard him call after me, but I didn't stop. I needed to see my son's presentation, to be there for him. When I slipped into the classroom, the kids were practicing. My boy waved at me, a shy grin on his face. I lifted a hand in a small wave back. My fury receded just enough for me to find a seat by the window. I felt a shadow looming, but I forced myself to watch my son, to listen as he launched into an enthusiastic speech about jellyfish and ocean currents. For those few minutes, I let everything else fade. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. She cornered me that night. He showed up at the school. She asked, voice tense. My parents said they saw him, and that he was looking for me. I nodded. She pressed a hand to her forehead. I told him not to do that. I couldn't even muster real anger in response. "He does what he wants, apparently," I said. Then I paused. "Is this why you sang that damn song in front of the bus driver too? Are you just collecting men's attention, or what?" She inhaled sharply, tears welling, but I felt no pity. She shook her head, stepping back. I wondered if she thought I was about to lash out physically. I wasn't, but a corner of me was glad to see her flinch, to witness that flicker of fear. Because after all this, maybe she should be afraid of losing me, of the consequences of her double life. "I never meant to hurt you," she said. I stared at the floor. "Right, you just meant to use me as a fallback, one you could rely on. The stable one." Silence stretched, thick as tar. Finally, she managed. "It's not that simple." "It is that simple," I snapped. Then, quieter, "But it doesn't matter now. Our son needs us. Beyond that, I have no idea." "John." Her voice cracked. "I don't," I said. I walked away and closed the bedroom door between us. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. 2 more nights passed, and I hardly slept. My dreams were chaotic. A swirl of that phone call, the doctor's voice, the flames consuming her plagiarized poems. In the morning, I was slow to get out of bed. though I forced myself to run a comb through my hair and scrape the stubble from my chin. I told myself, I'm not doing this for her. I'm doing this because I'm alive, and I might as well look like it. That same day, I had a meeting downtown with my editor. Ordinarily, I might have welcomed the distraction, focusing on a fresh investigative piece. But the second I stepped onto the bus, my car was in the shop. I felt dread coil in my stomach, because it was the same route my wife took sometimes, the same bus line that might have run into that man, or any number of men who recognized her. Paranoia gnawed at me, as though everyone else on the bus was sharing an inside joke. I took a seat near the back. A high school kid was playing music on his phone without headphones. It was a cheap pop song, but ironically, the woman singing it had a voice that reminded me of my wife's timid style. I clenched my jaw, forcing myself to gaze out the window. Then I remembered how my wife would sometimes hum that tune just for me in the kitchen, or in our bedroom, thinking I was asleep. Now she was singing for strangers, for the damn bus driver. Maybe that was just an innocent moment. Or maybe that's how it all begins, the small cracks that lead to bigger ones. I clenched my fists against my knees, telling myself to keep it together. My phone buzzed in my coat pocket. I pulled it out. A text from my wife. Please call me when you can. I shoved the phone back. She wasn't entitled to my immediate response anymore. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. In the days that followed, the quiet tension turned into something worse. An apathy that gripped the house. We barely spoke. She tried a few times to reach me, but I was done listening to justifications. I gave her short, curt answers, focusing solely on our child's needs. He noticed the shift, but he was too young to fully understand. One evening, while she was out, probably meeting him, for all I knew, I found myself alone in the house. I walked to the corridor where I'd recorded her footsteps, pressed the play button on the small recorder, and listened to those steps tapping across the hardwood. Then the faint hum of her voice. The memory stung, but I kept listening, because it was the only way I knew to confirm that this was all real, that I wasn't dreaming some grotesque nightmare. Footstep, footstep, the hush of a sigh, then the snippet of her singing. Then silence. I turned it off. I thought about revenge, about the ways men in old stories respond to betrayal, violence, mania, or leaving altogether. I wasn't sure which path was mine, but the hollow ache inside told me I had to do something, or I'd rot away in my own bitterness. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. My chance came unexpectedly. My wife had been out most of the day. I suspected she was with him. She left her laptop open in the living room. Ordinarily, I might consider snooping a line I wouldn't cross. But now, nothing felt too low. I had the moral high ground, if you can call it that. I opened her email. It was all there. Messages to him. Some were short, urgent. Others more personal, describing the confusion she felt, how she never wanted to lose me as her husband, but also how she had these feelings for him she couldn't shake. I read every word, my stomach turning. He was pressuring her to separate from me. She was resisting, half out of guilt, half out of fear. They talked about what if John finds out in older messages. Then the more recent ones. He knows. I don't know how to fix this. I scrolled further until I found an even older chain. Time stamped from around when we got married. She had been in contact with him then. They'd met up, apparently. She hadn't told me. The baby that followed was the result of that liaison. Every message spelled it out. I wanted to tear the laptop in half, fling it across the room. Instead, I forwarded the entire chain to my personal email, leaving no trace I'd done so, because I realized that I'd just discovered how she'd stolen more than poems. She'd stolen my peace, my fatherhood in some sense, though I still claimed my boy as my own, no matter what. I closed the laptop, fighting the urge to break it. A plan started forming in my mind, though I wasn't sure yet if it was cunning or stupid. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. That night, she returned late. I was awake, sitting in the living room with a single lamp on, the darkness pressing in around me. She froze in the doorway, jacket in hand. A few silent seconds. Then she said, "You're still up." I didn't respond. She set her purse down, stepped forward into the lamp's circle of light. "I wanted to talk," she said. "Properly." I swallowed, fighting the swirl of conflicting emotions. "Start talking." She glanced at my taped-up hand, the faint bruise on my knuckles, and looked down. "I'm sorry for everything." "Which part are you sorry for?" I asked quietly. "The affair, or the stolen poems, or letting me raise a son without telling me he might not be mine?" Her lips trembled. "All of it." I studied her face. I remembered the warmth in her smile when we first met, the excitement in her eyes whenever we'd share ideas, read each other's writing. She'd been a creative spirit, a source of laughter. Now, it seemed like I was looking at a stranger. "You can't fix this," I said, "no matter what you say." She sank onto the couch across from me, hands clasped in her lap. "I know, but I want us to be okay, at least for our child's sake." Our child. I almost spat. Let's not pretend biology doesn't matter. It doesn't to me, not for him. But don't act like you never considered that it would matter for me. Tears glistened in her eyes. "I'm sorry." Silence settled. She was waiting for me to reach across to comfort her. But I stayed perfectly still. The apology felt too small, too late. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. We lived in an uneasy truce for a week after that. She avoided the mention of the lover, avoided the mention of her poems. I threw myself into my work as best I could, even got a draft out to my editor. Meanwhile, my child improved, back to healthy routines. That kept me afloat, knowing he was well. Then came the final push. The day I decided to tear away the last veneer of her illusions. She was proud of that poetry collection, even though I'd already burned one copy. She still had digital files, of course. She bragged about it on social media, or at least used to. I marched to her writing desk, rummaged until I found the jump drive that contained her master file of poems. I also discovered older notebooks. Some lines were scrawled in my handwriting, with my old notes at the margins. Others were from her mentor's lectures, verbatim. I had all the proof I needed. She walked in, saw me at her desk. "What are you doing?" she asked, alarm in her voice. I held up the jump drive, demonstrating who really wrote these. Her eyes widened. "No, you can't. That was my career, my future." I let out a dry laugh. "Your future built on theft." She lunged for the drive, but I stepped aside. "I told you," I said calmly. "You can't fix this." She sank to her knees, tears sliding down her cheeks. "What do you want from me?" I stared at her. "Nothing. That's the point. I want nothing more." In that moment, I realized I had passed the need to scream or break things. My rage had burned so bright that only cold ash was left. I left the room, taking the jump drive with me. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. I spent the next day collecting every scrap of evidence. The emails to her lover, the original sources of her poems, the recordings of her footsteps, the images of that DNA test. It might sound insane, but that's what I do. I document, not to publish it or destroy her publicly, but maybe for my own sanity. To prove to myself I wasn't delusional, because in the swirl of betrayal, I needed a solid foundation. Evidence can't lie. That evening, I told her to pack a bag and stay with her parents for a while. "Let me have the house," I said. "I need space." She looked at me, face streaked with tears, but I offered no comfort. I'd run out of it. "All right," she whispered. She went to gather her things. Our child, half asleep, rubbed his eyes, confused. "Mom's leaving." I knelt down, kissed his forehead. "Just for a bit, buddy. You'll stay here with me, or with your grandparents. It's going to be okay." He nodded drowsily. I tucked him back into bed, swallowing the lump in my throat, because I knew none of this was okay. We were just patching up a sinking ship. I heard her footsteps down the hallway, the rustle of her suitcase. Then the front door clicked shut. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. After she was gone, I had time to think about what revenge really meant. Did I want to ruin her lover's life? Did I want to drag them both into some messy legal battle? Part of me did. Another part just wanted to vanish, to let them bury themselves in guilt. Days passed, then weeks. My child asked questions. When's Mom coming back? Is she okay? I answered gently, telling him she was sorting out some personal issues, but we both loved him. Because that part was true, at least. I'd never let him feel unloved, no matter how angry I was with her. I kept waiting for the next bomb to drop, for her lover to show up again, or for some confrontation. But it never came. Silence from her, silence from him. Maybe they both realized the damage was done, and there was no easy fix. In that silence, I discovered a strange clarity. I wasn't, in fact, consumed by hatred or heartbreak. I felt empty, yes, but in a way that gave me the freedom to exist day to day. I'd never been a man who flaunted emotions anyway. Maybe this was my final transformation. Cold, unfeeling, but also calm. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Then one evening, my phone buzzed. A single text from an unknown number, though I recognized it was him. I want to apologize. Can we meet? I stared at the screen a long time. Eventually, I typed, no. He tried calling once, but I let it ring. He left a voicemail I never bothered to play. Because what was the point? Apologies wouldn't fix anything. I'd become a ghost, drifting through the shell of my marriage, and that was that. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. But there was still one last piece I had to face. My family. My own parents, retired in Florida, kept calling, asking what was going on. My mother's voice was concerned, my father's more so. Finally, I gave them a sanitized version of events. We're having difficulties. I'm not sure what will happen. To my surprise, my father said, do you need us up there? We can fly out. I almost cried at that offer, but I steadied my voice. No, not right now. But thank you. I think they sensed the gravity. They said they'd check in every few days. I agreed, then ended the call, leaning against the wall, exhaustion heavy in my limbs. No father wants to admit he's been made a fool, that the son he's raised might not be biologically his. Pride is a funny thing. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. And so life continued. Each morning, I made breakfast for my boy, saw him off to school, worked on articles, went for solitary runs in the evening, letting the cold wind slash at my skin. Sometimes I'd return, stand in the living room where I'd burned her plagiarized book, and watch the shadows flicker across the fireplace. One Sunday, I rummaged in the closet and found old pictures, her and me, back in college. We looked so happy, so stupidly in love. I tossed them in a cardboard box. Maybe I'd burn them one day, or maybe I'd keep them. I didn't know. She tried calling me a few times, left voicemails that ranged from sorrowful to frantic, but I ignored them. If I picked up, I knew it would devolve into the same old circular arguments. My anger was still there, but it was now locked behind a thick wall of numbness. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. I might have gone on like that indefinitely, frozen in a quiet stasis, if not for an unexpected call from the school. My child had another fever. They wanted me to pick him up. I arrived to find him lying on a bench in the nurse's office, cheeks burning red, tears in his eyes. The nurse said it might be stress-related, maybe a mild infection. So I drove him home, picked up medication, made him soup. As I spoon-fed him broth, he looked at me and said, "Dad, are you mad at Mom?" I paused. "Yes," I admitted softly, "but it's not your fault." He sniffed, coughed. "She told me she loves me." "That's enough, right?" I couldn't answer, not directly. So I just said, "You should rest." I stayed by his side all night, pressing cool cloths to his forehead. He drifted in and out of sleep, occasionally murmuring. In those quiet hours, I realized I had to give him some semblance of normalcy. If not for me, for him. Let my wife handle her own guilt. Let her realize that losing me might be the simplest punishment of all. Because I didn't have the energy to keep fighting. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. The next morning, she appeared at our doorstep. Eyes rimmed with exhaustion, hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. She must have heard about the fever from the school nurse, or from my parents-in-law. "How is he?" she asked, voice cracking. "He's asleep," I replied curtly. She bit her lip. "Can I see him?" I didn't want to let her in, but my son deserved the comfort of his mother if he wanted it. So I nodded. She slipped inside, put her bag down, and tiptoed to his bedroom. Through the crack in the door, I heard her whispering to him, a soft lullaby of sorts. She had no shame singing in front of him, apparently. When she emerged, tears were rolling down her cheeks. He asked if I'd be home tonight. I folded my arms. "What did you say?" She wiped her face. "I told him I'd stay if you let me." A pause. The silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating. Finally, I asked, "What do you want from me?" She swallowed. "I want us to try. I want to make this right." I laughed, a low, bitter sound. "It's too late to make it right." She sank onto the couch, her shoulders sagging. "Tell me what to do. If you want me to leave, I will." I stared at her, the wife I once adored. Then I closed my eyes. "Stay for now," I said. "At least until he's better." She nodded, relief crossing her features. She tried to reach out to take my hand, but I pulled away. She nodded again, tears slipping free. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. For 3 days, we cohabited in an uneasy peace. She took care of our child, made him meals, read him stories. I watched from the sidelines, my heart a twisted knot. The weather turned colder, an early autumn chill seeping in through the windows. I let the silence be my shield, responding to her attempts at conversation with short, closed answers. On the third evening, after our son's fever finally broke, she came to me. "We need to talk." I was in the kitchen, rinsing a mug. The water was too hot, scalding my knuckles. I turned off the faucet. "Yeah," I said. "I guess we do." She exhaled shakily. "If you want a divorce, I won't fight you. I can't change the past." I set the mug aside. "No, you can't." Her shoulders quivered. "I know I messed up. With him, with my writing, with everything. But I'm scared of losing our family." I leaned against the counter, the overhead light casting harsh shadows across her face. I remembered how she used to be so full of color, of energy. Now she looked washed out, empty. But a flicker of pity rose in me, because I remembered the moment I realized I wasn't my son's biological father, how devastating that was. Maybe, in her own way, she was also drowning in regret. She said, "I can't fix what I did, but I can try to earn back your trust, if that's even possible." I let out a long breath. "I'm not sure trust is something you can earn back with words." She nodded. "I know, but maybe over time." A cold wave passed over me. "Time," I repeated. "What if I don't have that much patience anymore?" She hugged herself, trembling. "Then I understand. I'll leave." My jaw clenched. I stared at her, at the woman who had once been my partner in every sense, who had shared a life, a bed, a future. Now it was all undone. Finally, I said, "I can't decide right now." She swallowed. "I'll stay in the guest room until you figure it out." I nodded. The conversation ended there, both of us too drained to push further. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Over the next week, she tried small gestures, making me coffee in the morning, folding my laundry, leaving the living room neat. Each time, it only reminded me of how none of that changed the fundamental betrayal. But a part of me recognized that I still wanted my son to have something resembling a home. Then, one evening, I received a call from an old friend, someone who used to know us in college. He asked about how things were, said he'd heard rumors. I told him I didn't want to discuss it. But as the call was winding down, he casually mentioned, "By the way, I saw your wife's poetry collection. You must be proud. My hand tightened on the phone. Yeah, I lied. Real proud. After hanging up, I went to her writing desk again, rummaging through old files. Each piece was a reminder of how she'd stolen from me, from others, to create that fake mosaic. I found the contract with her publisher. She had told them the poems were all hers. She'd even given a short statement about the inspiration. None of it was real. In that moment, I realized she might still profit from that deception. Her book was out there, even if I'd burned a personal copy. She was essentially making a living from lies. The old bitterness flared again. Was I going to stand by while she profited off theft and heartbreak? Did she deserve to be called out publicly, to have her name dragged through the mud? Maybe. But that wouldn't solve anything for me. It wouldn't fix the pain. It would just multiply the damage for our son. And no matter how betrayed I felt, I still loved that boy. So I took a deep breath and set the contract down. My hand shook, the memory of those words from the DNA test swirling in my head. But I couldn't do it. I couldn't nuke her entire life, no matter how tempting, because that would also explode our child's sense of security. I slammed the drawer shut, took a few steps back, and let out a ragged breath. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. She found me at the kitchen table later that night, a cup of coffee growing cold in front of me. "You're up late," she murmured. I lifted my eyes. "I can't sleep." She lingered in the doorway. "I just wanted to say, I'm sorry. Again, I don't want us to be strangers. But if you need me gone, say the word." I stared at her, the exhaustion deep in my bones. "I don't know what I want," I admitted. "I only know that everything is different now." She nodded, eyes glistening. "I know." We sat in silence for a while. Then I said quietly, "He's my son, no matter what." She swallowed, a tear rolling down her cheek. "I know," she repeated, "and I'm grateful." I finished the coffee, lukewarm and bitter. She rose, walked away, and I heard her footsteps fade into the guest room. I closed my eyes. The rhythmic click of the fridge behind me filled the silence. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. It was a Friday when I made my final decision. My son had gone to bed, and she was out on the porch, staring at the sky. I stepped out, letting the screen door slam shut behind me. The night air was cool, the stars faint behind city haze. She glanced my way, uncertainty in her posture. I took a breath, feeling the ache in my chest. "I can't forgive you," I said, voice low. "Not the way you want. Maybe one day I can find acceptance, but not forgiveness. Not now." She closed her eyes. "Okay." I rubbed my palms together, trying to keep steady. "But I don't want to tear our lives apart with lawsuits or public shame. I won't out you for the poems. I won't ban you from seeing him. You can stay here for a while if you want, or you can leave if you prefer. I need space." She nodded, tears slipping free again. "I'll do whatever you need." I stared out into the darkness of our yard. The fence glimmered under the street lamp, a gentle breeze rustling the trees. In that moment, I felt a twinge of sadness for what could have been. Then I remembered the bus scene, the call on her phone, the DNA test result in my wallet, the college of betrayal. I said softly, "I'm not looking for payback. I'm not that kind of man. But I'm done being a fool." She reached for my hand, and this time, I let her brush her fingertips over mine. The contact was cold. "I understand," she said. "Truly." I searched her eyes, trying to see if she was genuine. For the first time, I sensed she meant it. Not that it mattered anymore. "Then let's handle this like adults. We decide if we separate officially or try counseling. Whatever it is, do it for him, not for us." She lowered her head. "Okay." Silence. The smell of wet grass drifted on the breeze, reminding me of summer nights we'd shared years ago. A pang of memory, a slow dancing in the backyard, her humming in my ear. I pushed it aside. Finally, I turned back toward the house. "I'm going in." She stayed outside, arms wrapped around herself, as though she felt a chill she couldn't shake, and maybe she never would. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Several days later, I found myself in an odd, unspoken peace. We co-parented, we shared the space. But I was already making plans to move out once I figured out the finances. She was quiet, no longer humming that tune. The entire atmosphere felt subdued, like a funeral that stretched on indefinitely. Yet each morning, I woke up with a strange sense of relief. I was alive, free in my own mind, if not in body. I had survived the worst blow to my pride, my trust, my illusions of fatherhood. And I hadn't lost my sanity. That had to count for something. I wrote an article for my job, a scathing piece about a local political scandal. My editor praised me, said it was my best work in months. Because, ironically, once you've experienced your own personal apocalypse, shining light on other people's lives becomes second nature. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Our final confrontation came without drama. Just a quiet discussion in the living room. She said she would move back with her parents for a while. I agreed that might be best. We didn't talk about the affair anymore. It was a stale topic now. She mentioned therapy. I shrugged. Up to you, I said. Maybe we'll both do it individually. I'm not sure couples therapy will help at this point. She nodded, tears shimmering. I still love you. I searched her face, ignoring the pang inside. I loved you too, I said, not using the present tense. Then I turned away. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. A few days later, we parted ways. She packed her belongings into her car, gave our son a tight hug, promised she'd visit him regularly or he could stay with her and grandparents. He nodded bravely, not fully understanding. I stood at a distance, letting them have their moment. When she was gone, the house fell into that profound silence again. But it felt different now. Emptier, yes, but also calmer. My son was in his room, coloring. Occasionally, I heard him cough, but it was the tail end of his cold. I walked to the living room and eyed the fireplace where I'd burned her stolen poetry. The faint scorch marks lingered, and a few half-burned scraps of paper remained. It struck me as a perfect metaphor for what was left of our marriage. A handful of ashes in an otherwise hollow space. I picked up a trash bin, crouched down, and cleared the remnants, letting them tumble into the plastic bag. Then I set the bag by the door, meaning to toss it later. My phone vibrated. A text from an old friend, just checking in. I turned the phone to silent. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. I'm not sure what the future holds. I'll never be the same. She took something from me that I can't get back. My trust, my pride, my sense of being the center of my family's world. But I still have my son. And each morning when I hear him call me Dad, it reminds me that my identity is more than DNA. I might not have fathered him biologically, but I've nurtured him. That's what matters most to me now. I don't know if I'll ever find it in me to forgive her. Forgiveness might not be necessary for me to live. Maybe that's the final lesson. Sometimes we carry a coldness inside us, and that's okay. It's still a feeling. It reminds us that we survived. Because that's what I did. I survived. Not for her. For him. For me. And in the hush of each morning, I wake up and feel the quiet as something precious. A space where there are no more lies, no more illusions. Just me, my son, and a fragile kind of peace. It's not an ending that ties up neatly with a bow. It's not a happily ever after. But it's real. And after all that's happened, real is the only thing I want. I step into my son's bedroom now, watch him sleep. His hair falls across his forehead, his breathing soft. He's the reason I choose to keep going. I place a hand gently on his blanket, and I smile. A small, true smile. He stirs, blinking up at me. Dad. Go back to sleep, buddy. He nods, half dreaming, and I quietly walk out. I linger in the hallway, letting the silence wrap around me, letting it remind me that I'm alive. I used to fear silence, equating it with loneliness. Now I realize it's a refuge I've earned, and she no longer sings in it. That's enough. For now.